Imagine waking up to headlines that feel like the plot of a scandalous miniseries. Only this time, the story is real. A woman the world knew nothing about has stepped into the spotlight with a claim that could shatter the reputation of the most famous couple on Earth. She calls herself DL, and she insists she is not merely a surrogate, not some anonymous helper paid to disappear. No, she says she is the true birth mother of Meghan Markle and Prince Harry's children. Let that sink in. The woman who carried and delivered the two youngest royals has allegedly been living in the shadows, armed with proof that could bring Buckingham Palace to its knees. Back in May 2019, the world paused as Prince Harry stood in front of a rustic stable, wearing that uneasy grin, announcing the arrival of baby Archie. But there was no hospital photo op, no triumphant wave from the maternity ward steps. Just Harry alone telling the press, "We had a baby." At the time, some thought it was a sweet gesture to keep things private, but others raised eyebrows. Why so secretive? Why no record of Meghan entering or leaving the hospital? Those questions were dismissed as tabloid gossip, the stuff of late-night conspiracies. Until now, because DL claims she has the receipts, official medical files, payment records, signed agreements, and messages spelling out a surrogacy arrangement that was never meant to be revealed. According to her, she was approached discreetly by a high-end agency in California in late 2018. The offer was clear: carry the Sussex children in complete secrecy. In exchange, she would be well compensated and protected. But once Lilibet was born, DL says everything changed. Care stopped. Communication was cut off. She became, in her words, just a vessel to be forgotten. Even more disturbing are the accusations that Meghan's team systematically erased DL's presence from the record, swapping out her name in medical forms, purging files, replacing every trace of her involvement with carefully curated narratives. And then came the birth certificate oddities. When Archie's certificate was released, it showed Meghan's full legal name. A few weeks later, the document was amended. Rachel Meghan Markle vanished, replaced by the grand title, Her Royal Highness, the Duchess of Sussex. At the time, palace aides insisted it was an administrative correction, nothing more. But in hindsight, with DL's documents surfacing, it feels far more deliberate, like a subtle legal maneuver to shield the truth. The internet erupted. Millions began re-watching clips of Meghan's pregnancy. The video where her baby bump folded strangely as she sat down, the photos showing her belly changing size in mere days. What once seemed like harmless speculation turned into a global frenzy. Legal experts weighed in. Could a surrogacy arrangement that was hidden from the public, and possibly the palace, invalidate Archie and Lilibet's claim to royal titles? Under the 1917 letters patent issued by King George V, the right to be styled as prince or princess requires being lawfully born of the body. DL's allegations are true, that phrase alone could spark an unprecedented crisis over legitimacy. Inside Montecito, the Sussex home reportedly slipped into chaos. Harry, usually so composed, was said to be pacing the halls at all hours, sleepless and tense. Aides described the atmosphere as suffocating. Anxious whispers, constant calls with lawyers, security heightened to a fever pitch. Meghan, known for her swift responses and polished statements, went silent. No Instagram posts, no press releases, no denials. That silence, once seen as dignified restraint, now looked like fear. Even their closest celebrity supporters began to back away. Influencers who had championed Meghan's voice were quietly deleting old tweets. A-list friends refused to comment. For herself, the very person who gave them a primetime platform to share their truth in 2021, maintained an icy quiet. Meanwhile, DL wasn't fading into the background. She doubled down, declaring she was willing to undergo independent DNA tests involving herself, Harry, Meghan, and both children. Her single demand: that the testing be performed by a neutral laboratory, free from royal or Sussex influence. If the Sussexes had nothing to hide, it seemed like the perfect moment to clear their names. But instead of agreeing, their legal team allegedly filed motions in California to stall the release of any documents and threatened to sue media outlets that planned to interview DL. The result? An even bigger explosion of speculation. Reporters and bloggers began picking apart every inconsistency in Meghan's narrative. Why was there never a nurse, a doctor, or a witness willing to confirm she'd been in labor? Why did a private jet linked to Harry fly to Nevada days before Lilibet's birth? a state now rumored to be where DL was housed in secrecy. Public trust in Meghan and Harry plummeted. Polls showed approval ratings dropping to their lowest point since Megxit. In the UK, over 70% of people polled said they no longer believed the couple was fully transparent. Even in America, where the Sussexes had enjoyed robust support, enthusiasm was cooling. Legal scholars warned that if DL could prove she was the gestational mother and that she'd been deliberately erased from official records, the entire monarchy could be forced to respond publicly. Some advisors reportedly began drafting confidential recommendations to King Charles, one of which included quietly suspending Archie and Lilibet's titles until the matter was clarified. And then there was the business fallout. A major wine company that had signed on to sponsor Meghan's lifestyle brand pulled out, citing brand safety concerns. Netflix was said to be reviewing their Sussex documentary for possible inaccuracies about the children's births. Even Spotify executives who had already parted ways with the couple joked privately that they'd dodged a moon bump-sized bullet. What was once Meghan's most powerful calling card, the story of a modern mother forging her own path, was now unraveling in front of millions. DL's narrative began to sound uncannily like the underdog tale Meghan herself used to tell. This twist cut deep. The roles were reversed. DL became the truth teller, Meghan the elusive figure refusing to explain. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. While Meghan reportedly retreated further behind Montecito's gates, Harry struggled to keep the illusion intact. Neighbors described seeing him wandering the grounds late into the night, alone and talking to himself. Insiders said he was haunted by the possibility that his children might one day discover the truth not from their parents but from viral headlines. As the tension mounted, major European outlets, unfettered by the UK's defamation laws, began preparing investigative series on the Sussex births. German and French publications announced plans to publish in-depth exposés, and Meghan's legal team knew they couldn't control the narrative overseas. DL, meanwhile, was preparing her next move. She'd already handed parts of her documentation to international attorneys in case she was pressured to withdraw. She told one interviewer, "I am not going away. The truth deserves daylight." The palace, advisors knew something had to give. Buckingham Palace has weathered divorces, affairs, and abdications, but never this. Never the possibility that heirs might have been presented under false pretenses. The Queen's motto had always been never complain, never explain. But this was a new era. An era when silence could look like complicity. And here we are, waiting. Meghan and Harry's empire teeters on the brink. The children at the heart of the scandal are innocent, caught in a storm they didn't choose. The world is left with questions that only the Sussexes can answer. Did they fabricate an origin story for their family? Was DL erased to protect an image? Will they ever come forward to confront these accusations head-on? And perhaps most hauntingly, if everything DL claims is true, what does it mean for the monarchy itself? But while the world waited for the Sussexes to say anything, some kind of statement, some denial, some hint that DL was simply a fraud, what came instead was a silence so thick it began to feel like an answer in itself. Within days of DL's revelations, an entire cottage industry of royal watchers, YouTubers, and investigative reporters had sprung up. Podcasts dissected every available detail. The sudden adjustments to the birth certificates, the lack of credible hospital eyewitnesses, and the eerie absence of maternity photos showing Meghan moments before delivery. Some of the most respected royal correspondents, people who had once defended Meghan and Harry against tabloid attacks, found themselves at a crossroads. Would they keep quiet to protect the couple's carefully polished image, or would they dig deeper, knowing the truth might make them complicit if they ignored it? One longtime royal editor, who spoke under condition of anonymity, admitted something remarkable. For years, we were told never to question the optics around those pregnancies. It was career suicide to even suggest something was off. But now everyone is re-examining the footage with new eyes. Indeed, those old video clips took on a strange new energy. The moment Meghan stooped to pet a dog and her belly appeared to compress unnaturally. The sudden shifts in size between photo calls only days apart. These oddities were once explained away by the palace as tricks of camera angles or the drape of her dress. Today, they felt like puzzle pieces that never quite fit. And then there were the timelines: archived press releases, archived flight logs, discreet mentions in court documents that no longer aligned as neatly as they once did. Investigative reporters combed through private jet records and spotted the same pattern: unexplained trips to Nevada and Southern California in the weeks before Lilibet's birth. Meanwhile, DL had not retreated. She gave a carefully choreographed interview to an independent media platform known for protecting whistleblowers. The interviewer described DL as composed, articulate, and strikingly unafraid. She detailed how Meghan's representatives, she claimed, kept her in virtual isolation for nearly a year. Private housing, encrypted messaging, medical escorts, layers of secrecy that seemed designed to ensure she'd never be discovered. According to DL, the arrangement had always been simple. She would carry the pregnancies, deliver the children, and then quietly fade back into her own life. In return, she was promised two things: privacy and payment. But she said both of those promises were betrayed. Once Lilibet arrived, she claimed the communication lines were abruptly severed. Payments stopped. Questions went unanswered. Her existence, it seemed, was deliberately scrubbed from the story. As DL's testimony gained traction, her story rippled across the Atlantic. European networks aired hour-long specials speculating on how Buckingham Palace might respond. French and German outlets, less constrained by British libel law, ran headlines so blunt they would have been unthinkable in London tabloids only a year before. Royal heirs born by surrogate? One cover read in block letters over an image of Harry and Meghan with blurred faces. Back in the UK, the impact on the monarchy's image was profound. Even those who had no affection for Harry and Meghan were unsettled by what this might mean for the institution itself. Because if DL was telling the truth, if Archie and Lilibet were born of her body rather than Meghan's, the palace might face constitutional questions with no modern precedent. At the heart of it all was that deceptively simple phrase from the 1917 letters patent: lawfully born of the body. Royal historians spent entire evenings on television explaining how that single line could be the fault line beneath the House of Windsor. If the children were not carried by Meghan herself, could their status as prince and princess be automatically invalidated? Could they be removed from the line of succession altogether? And even more uncomfortably, what if the Queen and now King Charles knew and remained silent for the sake of optics? As these questions gained steam, Harry and Meghan's defenders scrambled to protect their narrative. They argued surrogacy was legal, that Meghan and Harry deserved privacy, and that no parent should be forced to disclose intimate medical decisions. And while many sympathized with those arguments, the problem wasn't just the possibility of surrogacy, it was the perception of deceit. 'Cause for years, Meghan had spoken publicly about the beauty of carrying her children herself. She had described in vivid detail the kicks she felt, the bonding she experienced, and the transformative journey of pregnancy. Those statements were now dissected frame by frame. And the longer Meghan stayed silent, the more the public wondered if her words had been performance all along. Inside Montecito, the atmosphere reportedly devolved from anxious to outright paranoid. Multiple sources told journalists that staff turnover was accelerating. Senior aides who had once been part of the Sussexes' trusted circle had either been dismissed or quietly resigned. One staff member, who worked closely with the family during Archie's infancy, reportedly gave a statement to an American publication. "We were told never to ask questions about the birth. We were told it was private and that was the end of it." It was the kind of revelation that, in ordinary circumstances, might have been dismissed as gossip. But in this climate, when every detail was under a microscope, it sounded like confirmation. Legal experts weighed in on what DL's next move might be. Some speculated she would file a civil lawsuit in California seeking official recognition as the children's biological mother. Not for custody, but for truth. That scenario would almost certainly drag the entire affair into court filings, depositions, and sworn testimony. Imagine the spectacle: Meghan, Harry, and DL all appearing under oath to explain what really happened. Courtroom showdown worthy of global headlines, televised debates, and relentless speculation. For Meghan and Harry, the stakes couldn't be higher. Because if documents, hospital records, payment ledgers, and signed contracts survived legal scrutiny, the reputational damage would be catastrophic. Couple built their post-royal brand on authenticity, openness, and a rejection of palace deceit. To be caught in a deception of their own making would collapse everything they had spent 5 years trying to build. While all this unfolded, the palace remained stone-faced. Buckingham Palace issued no statement. King Charles continued with public engagements as though nothing had happened. But insiders insisted that behind closed doors, crisis meetings were underway. Senior advisors were said to be reviewing not only the succession statutes but also historical precedents for royal children born through modern reproductive technology. It was uncharted territory. Royal biographers speculated about the possibility of a soft suspension of Archie and Lilibet's titles, a quiet arrangement in which the children would remain in the line of succession but their styles of prince and princess would not be used in any formal capacity until clarity emerged. To some, that sounded like a fair compromise. To others, it was a cowardly way of dodging accountability. And so the narrative split. One side demanded transparency, the other side demanded compassion. Meanwhile, the story kept gathering momentum. A major U.S. network confirmed it had secured an exclusive sit-down interview to air in prime time. Teaser clips showed DL holding a thick stack of papers she said were original medical documents. Even before the broadcast aired, the anticipation was electric. Social media crackled with speculation. What exactly would DL reveal? Would there be DNA test results? Would she name the medical professionals who attended the births? Harry reportedly was near breaking point. Those who knew him described a man hollowed out by fear and regret, terrified not just of losing public favor but of losing the respect of his own children when they grew old enough to ask questions. If you listen closely, you could almost hear the echo of that fateful phrase, lawfully born of the body. Over a century old, that line had never been tested this way. Never had the crown been forced to decide if modern surrogacy arrangements invalidated royal succession. Never had the monarchy stared down the barrel of a crisis this singular, this unprecedented. And yet here we are, waiting for DL to open the final vault of evidence, waiting for the Sussexes to respond, waiting for a palace that can no longer ignore the storm. Truth, whatever it is, will not stay buried.